Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast, where we discuss business solutions to help listeners develop and implement action plans for true lean process improvement. I am your host, Patrick Adams. Hello and welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. My guest today is Ken Segel. Ken is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Value Capture. In his role as CEO, Ken provides support to CEOs of healthcare organizations dedicated to eliminating injuries and improving quality as a means to dramatically raise the clinical and financial performance of the entire institution. I'll also say that he is a certified facilitator of the Shingo Institute, and we'll talk a little bit more about the rest of his background as we get into the show here. So welcome to the show, Ken.
Patrick, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the podcast and all of your work and how you advance the field as well as helping lots of folks. So it's good to be learning with you today.
Well, thanks, Ken. We actually met in person this last year at the Michigan Lean Consortium. You were keynoting along with Mark Graben, and I sat in and I thought it was super powerful. And we are going to get into a little bit around that topic today. So I'm excited for our listeners to hear a little bit more about that keynote and what you and Mark talked about and how that can help, many organizations. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. But before we, dive into some of those things, I mentioned that you co-founded Value Capture. Yeah. And for those that are, meeting you for the first time, may have not heard of Value Capture. Can you tell us just a little bit about Value Capture's mission, the history, just so they can get a sense for your work in healthcare and how that combines, safety and also, kind of ties in with the Toyota production system as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And really honored to talk about it. We are a trusted advisory firm trying to make the principles that we all share true in healthcare. And for us, that means we really say that our mission is about habitual excellence, starting with safety. Safety is the lever to get there. And our vision, which we always attach it to, is healthcare without, harm, without weight, without waste. And actually beyond that, working to produce perfect health, so all that's possible in terms of things to avoid, and then all that's possible when we really harness these ideas to allow people to do, ideal work and what that can all mean for us as people. In terms of our history, we were formally founded in 2005. And so it's amazing that we're getting toward 2 decades of work in healthcare to try to bring these ideas forward. We came out of something called the Pittsburgh Regional Healthcare Initiative, which was one of the first efforts in the late 1990s and early 2000s to come together and show that these ideas applied in healthcare as well as everywhere else. And we were fortunate working with the CDC and others to show that you could eliminate healthcare associated harms that people had assumed were just part of the nature of the enterprise, and that zero was possible, and that beyond that, it was possible not just to succeed in sort of individual harms and individual projects, but to actually apply these ideas across a whole hospital or even a whole health system. And we founded Value Capture to sort of grow out of that, to go work with health system leaders around North America, really, who didn't want to just run projects using the application of lean ideas and safety ideas, but really wanted to apply the principles in the fullest way we think of Toyota production system as a system. And I've been humbly learning and trying to get better at that ever since. One more mention, Patrick. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we were inspired in all of this work, not just by Toyota, but really by Paul O'Neill, the former CEO of Alcoa, who had partnered in a really deep way with Toyota to help improve Alcoa, but also brought this amazing leadership framework rooted in safety and thinking about what he would call theoretical limits, rooted in values, we might say true north, to make massive performance turnarounds in organizations possible and people well led to be able to do things that they wouldn't have imagined that they could achieve prior to applying these principles in the full way with great leadership. So those are some of our roots. That's what we're trying to do, and look forward to talking more about it as we go.
Yeah, no, I love hearing that history, and just you guys are obviously very specifically working in the healthcare industry, but a lot of the things that you're applying, that you've learned along the way, that the different institutions that you're working with, are the principles that they're utilizing, as you said, tie back to a lot of the principles from the Toyota production system and other areas. So, even if someone is listening in and they're not from the healthcare industry, that I think that's what I'm looking most forward to, is just hearing, as we kind of talk through this, how those principles are utilized in the healthcare industry, and how they can be, flexible, and if you understand them well enough, the value that these principles can bring to any organization in any industry are just so transformational. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
From a safety perspective, I mean, you can't get any better than that. So that's what I'm excited about. Before we go down that road, though, people are hearing you for the first time, and I gave just a very short snippet of who you are today, but there's a lot behind that. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal story, and even, what brought you to this mission of, helping to, improve safety from in the healthcare industry, and tell us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll try to not make this boring, but by giving only my short bio, you were really protecting me, because when people hear these next few bits, they'll see I have a pretty checkered past.
Yeah.
But I actually started my career thinking the way to change the world was through policy making and politics. And so I went right down to DC, and I was sort of a fast riser on Capitol Hill as a leadership aide, and worked at a mid-high level on a key presidential campaign. And I was even called a policy director of one of our major political parties. But I was getting a little frustrated with how reductive that whole game could be. Very important for changing some key conditions, but we all know the limits of that. And I moved back to the community I grew up in, Western Pennsylvania, looking for something deeper, and became a foundation program officer in sort of the public health space. And I was really lucky to learn from a really committed foundation leader that it wasn't about our ability to hand out grants. It was about our ability, using the funding we had, to get the big systems to work and think differently. And it was in that context, when Western Pennsylvania was trying to figure out how to get out of a deep recession, our manufacturing challenges and problems, and really set a course for the future, including in our healthcare sector, which was becoming increasingly important, that we connected with Paul O'Neill at Alcoa as CEO. And I had been thinking about going to business school outside of Pittsburgh. And I said, wait a minute, I'm going to restructure everything, because I think this is my business school right here. I mean, I ultimately did go, but I went to school with Paul O'Neill and with the great leaders in healthcare. And then, through Paul and others and his team at Alcoa, leaders from from Toyota itself and others, and just, have been on a learning journey ever since with these ideas.
Yeah, I obviously we'll drop your full bio into the show notes, but you touched on a few things there, and I think, again, if anyone's interested to go back and look at Ken's background, it's pretty amazing, the different things that you've been involved with, and again, just seeing the path that you've taken and where you are today with value capture is pretty amazing. The work that you guys are doing in healthcare is just outstanding. And let's talk about that. So let's talk about lean in healthcare.
Yeah.
Obviously, for many people that are listening, I think a large portion of our listeners, do come out of the manufacturing industry, which, is understandable given the Toyota production system, the automotive industry and things like that. But in not too long ago, the lean started to find its way into other industries, including healthcare. And I'm so glad that it did because of the amazing results that it's having. But tell us a little bit about that. What is the state of lean in healthcare today?
Yeah, so Patrick, I appreciate that, and I too am really glad lean and these principles have been reached the wall in healthcare, and and a lot of people realize their potential, and that we've had really a lot of examples of single institutions making a big difference for their patients and their teams, and now coming out of formal sort of health services research, some evidence, formal evidence, highest quality studies that where lean is applied, as the studies say, with intensity, with some level of intensity, it does make a difference on outcomes from quality and experience and cost. That said, I have to tell you, Patrick, and your listeners, it is not a great success story for these principles in healthcare yet. And indeed, I would say, to be honest, it's a danger point.
Mm.
And to share why, and we're not the only sector this has happened, but with the pandemic having hit, et cetera, there's been distraction, some lean journeys have stalled, et cetera. It's certainly true. But even before that, if you look, we have, I think now more than 60% of healthcare institutions say they do lean, at some level.
Mm-hmm.
And what is true is there is activity going on in those institutions. Even more, there are people in our community, the improvement community, who are deeply skilled, right? Who know what this looks like, who are now working in those institutions, which is great, right? Because from that, all is possible.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the scale of the results overall, like the actual beta, the actual changes versus what you and I and your audience knows are possible, the twice the productivity, the twice the quality, all of that stuff, those magnitude of results across the sector are not there yet.
Mm.
And we can talk in a little bit more about sort of how I see why that is and where we are. But I just want to be honest, for all the promise that it's coming into healthcare, there are ways it's come in because of healthcare's history and pattern that are sort of not the full system and not all wrapped together powerfully enough to make the difference that we need.
Mm. Well, I'm glad that, I mean, the transparency is great because this is exactly what we need in order to improve, right? Yeah. So let's talk about that. I mean, let's dive in. What are some of the challenges that you are seeing in the healthcare industry with the breakdown?
Yeah. Well, some of the challenges are maybe endemic to the culture of healthcare, such as healthcare has a long history of being exposed to different forms of improvement, everything from CQI to TQI to Six Sigma, et cetera, and sort of making a modest commitment, but not at that profound level to pull it all together and say, this is the way that we're going to run the place. And so we sort of are left with what people sometimes refer to as sort of an alphabet soup. And then so you get these patterns where they just sort of take in, well, what does that version of the system have to contribute? And okay, we've got people with that skill. We run some projects where we tap onto those tools, but it's not powerful enough to move the numbers the way that we want. So some of that is just sort of a historic pattern. And there are some universal things, right? So one of those being that that if this work is left principally to the experts, right? Those of us who are sort of the lean experts in the organization, internally or externally, and not seen as a fundamental capacity and skill that operating leaders have to embody, right? To be able to know how to move from push to flow to pull, And in the radical change of having line workers that add value be responsible for building quality in, but leaders being responsible for flow. If that sort of fundamental commitment to ownership isn't there, and often it's not, right? We have a very complicated industry. Healthcare has certain disadvantages versus other industries in terms of the over complexity for how it gets paid and all kinds of stuff. And we have different professional silos in healthcare that sort of make leadership harder. But that fundamental ownership by operating leaders has not taken deeply enough in healthcare, so that they are deeply committed enough to know what lean or TPS really is at its core in the production system, right? So we don't have enough power in the production system. The other thing I'll say, just because I know it's such a knowledgeable audience, is when you go into healthcare organizations, if you just pick, of that 60%, you just went in randomly to those doing lean, you'd see a lot of evidence of management systems typically. And because about a decade ago, we fell in love with management systems, lean daily management systems in healthcare. And it came out of certain institutions that were way ahead on lean production, like ThedaCare in particular. And we were part of this, working with ThedaCare. And they had realized that they needed the management system elements to sort of stabilize everything and keep it going and keep it improving. And so they did a brilliant business production system, they called it, and then shared it with the world, which is a wonderful display of the values, and we helped teach it.
Yeah.
But in the average healthcare institution, they were not nearly as far along in lean production. The management system with its tools that leaders sort of get right more easily became an easier thing to hold on to. It wasn't forcing problems up out of operations continuously, and such a challenge to how leaders work and what their role is. And so what we got is some maturity in our management systems, less in our production systems. And the problem is, as you and I and the audience knows, the management system doesn't solve the big problems. It doesn't set up the horizontal flows of value and make sure they're going. So our prescription, our analysis, RE3, and what we're sharing with those we work with is we've got to rebalance. We've got to really rebalance to make sure the primary work system is set up the right way with the right ownership, really embedding TPS flows, and then take that management system and really lock it all in. So that's a long diagnosis, but that's what we're seeing and thinking.
The most dangerous phrase in our language is "we've always done it this way."
There are an awful lot of posers out there. People that do lean because they're mandated to do it. They think it will work.
How stable are you today? What are your goals? Are you generating small, simple improvements?
There are very few people that embrace lean with their full heart, head, and emotion.
Let's imagine that your current output is top-notch. Is that enough to stop innovating and stop reaching for more?
Patrick's book uncovers the essence of what those organizations look like and what the posers look like. Caution, are you in the fake zone or the real zone?
Order your copy today at avoidcontinuousappearance.com.
No, that's good, and I think that resonates probably with listeners that are also outside of the healthcare industry, because very similar challenges, on either side. And you did start to kind of walk down the road of some of the things that you guys are doing to come alongside your health system clients and helping them to break through. Would you say, is there a a lot of times we talk about you can't improve chaos and you need to start with stability. I mean, would you guys in the healthcare industry, would you say there's a first step, a second step? Would you say it depends on the organization and where they're at in their journey? I mean, what are the things that you guys are doing to come alongside them and really help advise them to bring them down the right path?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question, and and the podcast is a limited time, and I think of all the nights we in this field can talk through this stuff, right, about what's the right order and all that stuff.
Sure.
So I'll just highlight a couple elements of our basic roadmap, right, our ideal target state, and it's a little different than some others. But then I'd like to also tell you what we're doing on this sort of need to correct toward the work system, as we said.
Perfect.
So because I said, we're all about leading with safety, we actually talk with leaders, from the beginning. We don't come in and assess and tell them what they need to do. We lead them through a self-assessment based on the principles. If you looked at it, it's sort of an A3 being worked through themselves, where through going to Gemba and looking at their own data and having key conversations around the principles, they diagnose themselves and where are they and what do they need to work on. And so every place does come up with their own map because every place is in a different spot. But we talk to them about, you want to begin affecting the culture of the place with these ideas and these principles and making them true for everybody as soon as possible at some level. And so we encourage them to pick safety, harm to patients or harm to staff, and harm to staff is a great one to start with. And right away, make those harms visible one by one to everyone in the organization in a way that traditionally in healthcare they don't. It sort of flows up into a monthly report, and there's a department working on that and things like that. And so bringing greater transparency and real-time problem solving to those harms in a way that sort of begins to mobilize that real-time help chain, right, that we'll recognize from lean production. And that everybody across the organization can feel, right? Oh my God, we're handling that differently. We have more transparency. Everybody's having to work on their problem-solving skills. Leaders are grappling with what does this mean about how our systems are set up right away. So we try to get them going on that level, at one level, but that's not inherently stabilizing, right? And in some senses, it's destabilizing, right? Because you're trying to, in an exciting way, connect the culture differently, but it's also about change at a certain level. So right away, we are trying to work with them to say, but the big those are values becoming true, and you will move your safety numbers very fast that way, which is exciting. But in terms of succeeding as a business, you've got to right away attach to the value stream flows or the pathway flows for pure TPS, and let's pick an area that is key to your business, a key business problem, and create what we call an executive learning lab to sort of see the difference that these ideas can make, moving from push to pull and all that stuff to get the outcomes. And then not copy and paste that, but spread it by capability building through the growth of leaders. And recently, we've really been making a much bigger push about really calling it that executive learning lab, because leaders have to learn how this stuff works, right? And how they need to lead to put it into place, not just, if I have a problem, call in a team expert in lean to help me. And so that's our generic model. Lately, though, as we've realized that the capability isn't as deep as we want it to be in leaders in terms of moving at that systems levels, our team has started doing something we call leader looping, where we get the C-suite, if they're able, and we really advocate for it, to come together on a key business challenge. And in healthcare, it's not hard right now, right? Because we've got cost crises driven by staffing problems, federal government stopping their pandemic payments, and there's a deep sort of set of intersecting business problems happening that has virtually every healthcare organization deeply worried. And so we're getting those leaders out to attack a key problem, such as when people are in the hospital longer than they should be, that not only exposes them to more harm, because every day you're in the hospital, your likelihood of harm goes up considerably, but also it's bad flow and it costs money. And so attacking that problem together, applying the principles through going out and seeing together, coming back, making sure the problem solving is flowing, across their sort of the boundaries, the top-down boundaries that the different leaders lead, through active Gemba, coming back, changing A3s, just that much more active, this is we're going to take on together and refresh our learning and break through in a big problem way to sort of get ourselves, not only solve a big problem, help with the quality and the cost crisis, but sort of rebase ourselves and sort of how this works as a system. So that's some of what we're doing.
Oh, I love it. And again, there's only a short amount of time here, but obviously I thought you did a great job kind of laying out as much as you could in a short amount of time. We're going to talk about this at the end, but obviously if anyone's interested to hear more about that particular topic, reaching out to you would be ideal, because I'm sure there's so much more that we could talk about with that. But you've talked about patient safety a lot, and for obvious reasons. There's definitely some scary headlines recently about patient safety not having progressed as much in the last few years as it could have otherwise. And even for organizations outside of the healthcare industry, I always see safety number one. It's promoted that way, but then I don't always see the actions following the term safety is number one, even within industries outside of healthcare. When we were at the MLC conference and you keynoted with Mark Graben around workforce safety, you guys talked about the fact that workforce safety needs to be an imperative to revive or strengthen lean journeys. What would you say to those that are listening in, both in the healthcare industry around patient safety, as well as outside of the healthcare industry around workforce safety, and why that's such an important concept, and why now is the time or the right time for people to be focused on this?
Yeah, well, Patrick, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to that. And, I think in a true north sense and a constancy of purpose sense, a lot of that comes from, the background we all share, and that particularly with elements of our Alcoa background are particularly intense for us. And that is, Paul O'Neill, our founding chairman, he used to talk about, the words are great, but to your point, every company, and even companies doing lean or TPS, speak the right language generally. But, where's the evidence that it's true? Right, that the values are really true. And so safety, whether we're actually harming someone on our team, through the circumstances that we allow to be present in our environment, or a patient in our care, like that's a pretty good example, piece of evidence that we're not there yet, right? We're not yet applying the ideas at the level that that is required, to not only help people, and start not harming them. So there's a foundational sense of that toward the action, and the evidence that it's true, to your point, which you led with. The second thing is why now, and why did we make the case for workforce safety as key to lean journeys and recalibrating things? So if we think about what we all have gone through for the last 3 years, right, in terms of the pandemic and its after effects, all of that's about people, right? If we look at healthcare and what's happened to healthcare, a lot of people in the healthcare workforce checked out. They said, we can't take it, right? We got into these vicious cycles of people being put into position of not being able to succeed in caring for patients, which is a terrible psychological burden, not feeling enough support. And so not feeling like they could succeed and sort of opting out, maybe being present, but, you're only getting half of their effort and heart, or taking another career. And then this vicious cycle of having to hire, traveling staff or nurses that are working far away from home so that they can get paid more money, and the vicious cycle of finance, but also the impacts on patient care, right? Then you have much newer nurses or nurses that aren't used to working there. And it's the opposite of the sort of effect that we want, right? But if we keep in mind that it started with people and how they were treated, we go back to our first principles and Paul O'Neill saying, well, if we're all committed to creating a perfectly safe workplace, that's evidence that the values are true in a way that matters deeply to you and I, so that we can go back to our families and everybody else in one piece. But also, you can't get there without digging into the ideas and your processes deeply enough and actionably enough and bringing your values to bear. That is the path back to, if I describe the vicious cycle, the virtuous cycle that we all want, right? That we know that we are valued, and that we value each other. It's not even we're valued by the company. It's like the company is us, and we take care of this place, and that means we take care of each other, and we have expectations for each other. And we are so committed to excellence that we learned how to keep ourselves safe in either a scary industrial environment, based on what's going on, or medicine is very dangerous, right? The operating environments physically, the amount of things that are happening with radiation and everything. We figured that out. And that means we know how we can do it for our patients too. And by the way, we can be excellent at all of these processes. And, at this moment where, in my view, too much of the leadership in our organizations has become too transactional, hey, layoffs are okay, it happens. This is a chance to reconnect with people in the deepest way, which are the sources of excellence that we have to tap into and move with together, toward a better future. So we think workforce safety is a great opportunity, not just, safety and what that means, which is profound, and not just for the safety journey, but this deeper tie to lean and TPS, which is necessary for the highest levels of system performance. So that's
a great response. And one other question just popped into my head while you were talking.
Yeah.
In your experience with the clients that you've been working with, would you say that some of those other metrics that they're searching after, when they do put truly put safety first, and they are taking actions to make sure that their people feel safe, and that their work is actually safe, do the other metrics follow? Do the results come? Because I do hear that, and I've experienced that, but I want to know from your experience, what do you see?
Yeah, absolutely. In the relatively few places that have truly led with safety and sort of had the hypothesis that it will pay off, you see the same remarkable things in healthcare as in other industries. Again, where it's not common for places truly deeply to do that. But we were just talking about a significant academic medical center where a leader about 10 years ago made this bet. And over the course of 4 years, all of their key quality and safety and experience metrics improved by at least 50%. So it was a big win there.
Yeah.
But it was also their best financial year ever in that fourth year, and continued to build. And it's because it's about, it's the hearts and minds, it's everything coming, things come into alignment, right? These are the most important challenges. We're working on them. Don't just know the goal, we know the way, and we're developing some skills in the way, and we're developing what it feels like to win. And, another thing I think about sometimes, Patrick, is we all also hold these little wounds from where we know what we want, and we know how we're trying to get there individually or in teams, but we also know the gaps. And when you see those gaps start to be able to close, and then this gap and then that gap, because we're not just doing it project by project. It's, oh my God, we can apply that idea right here, right? How to structure a binary connection between people, and you start to get those multiplier effects, everything opens up, right? And things get better. So it definitely all links in healthcare too, where we have that kind of leadership.
Yeah, I love it. It's definitely my experience as well. So, but again, like you said, unfortunately, there's not a lot of organizations that are at that level or committed at that level. But, when people feel like they're cared about, not just feel it, but they actually experience it.
Yeah.
And, then of course that's going to be, it's going to reciprocate, and they're going to, take care of the company as well. And so, thank you for laying that out.
Yeah.
One last question as we kind of wrap up today, Ken. So a lot of our listeners, probably have heard the term flavor of the month, and, activities come and go, or they feel, oh, there's a huge push for workforce safety, and then, oh, now there's not. How do we combat that? What would you say is, organizations should look at next, when it comes to operational excellence within their facilities or within their organizations, in order to, kind of keep from heading down that road and really be committed to the overall system of operational excellence? What would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, and and Patrick, I don't have the full answer on this at all. I really appreciate how you explore this on the podcast, and it's an ongoing conversation. But I think some of the ideas that I have, just to share a couple, are, not revolutionary. But we got to get back again to, the holding on to true north, and having that be really clear for everybody. This will not change.
Yeah.
The next recession, next pandemic, this is who we are. And in all our behaviors, we aspire to make this true, period. And a commitment and a realization, and all the studies show this, the places that switch horses all the time on what formula is right tend to be mediocre performers, right? There are approaches to this that are more powerful than others. But the key is pick a version. We hope it's lean and TPS in the deepest sense, driven by safety, and then continuously improve that. And that's because then you're building the skill, right? You're building the continuous improvement skill for whatever it is, and you're constantly keeping the that really powerful sense of the goals tied to true north that embeds, sort of the values and behavioral characteristics. And then the method is, how fast can we go that way? And Paul O'Neill used to talk about, well, don't we want to find the methods that have worked the best since World War II and have been proven, to produce these differential results? So if we keep that in mind, I think that's one thing. The other thing, and that I'm talking a lot about now in healthcare, is we have to simplify it. We have, in some instances, too many tools, too many Christmas trees of things that can feel overwhelming to leaders or people coming in like it's a little bit of a cult. And I point to a healthcare leader we have in South Carolina who's going to be hosting a sort of go and see for other leaders for us in June, who he came out of the Army, came out of the Special Forces, and worked with us and Mr. O'Neill about 15 years ago. And that he has boiled things together in a way that is super powerful. And he calls it pancake syrup. He calls his method pancake syrup.
Wow. Okay.
And
I'm interested.
and for him, and he this is Mike Bundy down at Prisma Health. And Mike says, so what are you talking about? And he says, well, when I sit on these analyses of harms that have happened in institutions, you always hear about time. The frontline staff doesn't have time. They don't have time. They don't have time. Why? Because things go wrong in daily operations. And, we have to have the pancake syrup on the patient's food tray every time the right way, or else, in 15% of the time, that nurse is going to get a call ball or something that is waste, that is distracting them, that is keeping them from their standard work, and what is that? And so he teaches everybody what he calls micro PI. And then every day, the whole place starts with the frontline teams, which he calls special operators, like the specials. They have their standard work checklist. The suppliers have theirs, all tied to flow organized by safety because we don't want people in the hospital longer than they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all transparent. And if you are off on any of your metrics, things go wrong on any of those, you're doing a root cause on that in real time in your unit, and with your customers and your suppliers. And you don't hear a lot of lean words. You don't hear a lot of TPS words. You see less visual management. It's all honed down compared to other places. And he gets better results faster. So I think we have to really get back in touch with what's the essence of the thing and how our places are run to really, get much better velocity and much better attachment from a broader cross-section of people.
Love it. So Ken, I'm very interested in the show and tell in June. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit more about that if they were interested to maybe be part of that? And then what we'll do is we'll drop some links into the show notes for anyone to get some more information or register for that. Can you just tell us when, where?
What about Patrick? Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity. So this is we call it our CEO seminar. It's called Leading with Safety. And it is co-sponsored with a group called the Leapfrog Group, who does sort of been the leaders on safety, advocating for safety and tracking safety in healthcare. It's going to happen at Prisma Health in Columbia, South Carolina on June 12th and 13th. And it's full of go and see. It'll be primarily healthcare leaders. And the key is that we want it's okay for an improvement executive to come if a C-suite operating leader is there, because it's really about the operating leaders leading with safety, sort of listening in a way to the improvement side of the ball. But if you'd like to come, please come. The last one that we did at Duke University Health System in June, we had the mayor of a major city. We had a superintendent of a school district in California come and join the learning. And of course, that adds to it, right? So if you're not in healthcare, don't worry, you'll learn a lot and you'll actually contribute a lot to the learning. So thank you for making it possible for people to find that. It's on our website, valuecapturellc.com. And thanks for putting it in the show notes. And again, it's called Leading with Safety, CEO Seminar, Leading with Safety.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so we'll throw that in the show notes. I also want to make sure that everyone that's listening has your contact info as well.
Sure.
What's the best way for them to reach out to you, Ken, and if they have questions or want to connect with you or learn about value capture?
Yeah, so email or cell is great. You can also get to me through LinkedIn and Twitter. Also, I'm on. The key is my last name is Segel, Segel, and all my contact information is available on our website. Just pull down who we are, and you'll find me right there. And of course, I'd love to talk.
Perfect. Well, Ken, it's been great to have you on the show. Love what you guys are doing at Value Capture. And, obviously it was great to connect with you up here in Michigan and learn a little bit more about what you guys are doing around workforce safety and patient safety. Thank you for what you're doing and just appreciate you being on the show.
Patrick, I want to extend my thanks to you. Again, it's a great opportunity to share what we're doing and more than us, the leaders in healthcare that are applying these ideas under challenging circumstance, but then deep appreciation to you, how you've advanced the field and how you're helping everyone.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.